teaching is just your job. Even though, for a lot of people it's calling, it's a passion, all of that kind of stuff, it's a job. And you're going for a new job.
I'm Lisa Harding, ex-EdTech CEO turned certified teacher career coach. It wasn't all that long ago that I was recruiting, interviewing, and hiring teachers for roles in corporate America. Teachers that ended up being some of my all-time best employees. Fast forward through my own career transition, where I left my role as CEO to become a stay-at-home mom, I now work with and empower teachers to transform their lives by turning their once distant career dreams into realities. In this podcast, I give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. If you're a burnt-out teacher or simply need a change and you're looking to create a life you love, you're in the right place, friend. Let's get started. Hello, my name's Lisa Harding. I'm joined tonight by subject matter expert De'Ara Bennett, and I can't wait to introduce De'Ara to you. I actually started following De'Ara on LinkedIn probably about a year ago when I started the Facebook group, and I loved the content that she was putting out there. I messaged her, introduced myself, and then we became professional connections, and I networked with her. So it's a great example of how networking can really bring you together with people, and I can't wait for De'Ara to share her strategies more in depth. She is a professional LinkedIn strategist, and she does ghostwriting and LinkedIn profiles and content for founders, CEOs, and executives. She also has a background with content marketing, and kind of what I love the most was that she's also a former teacher. So what better expert to learn from than someone that's been there, done that. Her contact information's on the screen, but there's no better way to introduce her than just turn it over and welcome De'Ara.
Hello, I am so excited you're here. You're going to learn so much today. My name is De'Ara Bennett, and I am the founder of Career Confidence by D, where my goal is to help you confidently communicate your value to potential employers. So before I get into the content, I want to give you a little background about who I am and why I'm not just some random person telling you how to write a resume. So I am also a former teacher. I taught 6th through 12th grade business, marketing, career development, financial literacy, and technology courses. So I've been helping people with career development things for a while. I also led writing workshops for college students. I taught marketing workshops, marketing boot camps for female entrepreneurs. And I freelance as a content marketer for ed tech companies. And now I am a LinkedIn strategist and ghostwriter for a branding agency where I ghostwrite for CEOs and founders of multi-million-dollar companies. So everything that I do centers around helping people communicate their value, and that's the approach that I take to resume writing. It's all about communicating. Here's what I have to offer, and I'm going to explain exactly how this is relevant to what you need. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, copyright notice. Please don't copy this. I work really hard to give you all this information, and as a teacher, you know plagiarism is bad. So instead of plagiarizing or copying it, sending it to everyone, just send them here so that they can get this great information as well. Today, you are going to learn how to shift your mentality from education to corporate, how to format your resume so that it's ATS-friendly, which I'm sure you've heard about that dreaded ATS system. So we're going to talk about that and some myths about it as well. How to create your contact section, how to analyze job descriptions for keywords, and how to write a strong professional summary. Now in part 2, that's where we get into your bullet points and all of that other good stuff. But this is going to help you set a strong foundation for your resume so that everything you learn in part 2 has something good to sit on. All right, so before we get into all of it, we have to talk about the mentality shift that has to happen when you go from education to corporate, or when you want to go from education to corporate. The reason why this requires a mentality shift is because in corporate, no matter what the mission is, no matter if it's an ed tech company, all of that, the goal for them is to make money. By hiring you and paying you a salary, they are making an investment because they believe that you will help them make money, save time, save money. You're going to help them in some kind of way that leads to money. So that's why it's important to communicate what you bring to the table, because if not, saying, well, I want I want a remote job with work-life balance, $85,000 salary. All of that sounds good, but you have to be able to explain, here's why what I bring to the table is worth $85,000. And if you can't explain it, they're not going to know because they're not going to connect the dots for you. You have to look at yourself as a professional who has teaching experience, not a teacher who is trying to be something else. And that's a huge issue that I see when I work with transitioning teachers. Oftentimes they view themselves as just a teacher. I'm just a teacher who wants to do customer success. I'm just a teacher who wants to do instructional design. And the issue is teaching is just your job. Even though, for a lot of people it's calling, it's a passion, all of that kind of stuff, it's a job and you're going for a new job. You are a professional, point blank period, who has teaching experience. And you might have other experiences from before being a teacher. And so you're not going to hide the fact that you're a teacher, but on your resume, you're going to focus solely on the experiences and accomplishments that are relevant to the job you want. When they read your resume, they should not think, okay, this person did a lot of stuff with kids, unless you're applying for another teacher role where you'll be working with kids. Otherwise, they should think, wow, I didn't know teachers did all of this stuff, because you are highlighting only the relevant parts. And the only way instructing kids, assessing students, managing classroom behavior, the only way those are going to be the most relevant things you need to put front and center is if you're applying for teaching jobs. So that's something that, you have to think about. Get out of the mentality of, I'm a teacher. Everything I did is teaching related. Everything I did dealt with kids. You got to get out of that mindset because they're not hiring teachers. Okay. They're hiring qualified people. And so you have to show that you are a qualified person. Um, the other side of that is if you just put a whole bunch of teacher things, and when I say teacher things, I mean teach kids, give tests, the stuff that people who haven't been in the classroom since they were students, the stuff that they think teachers do. So if you think back to when you were a student, what you thought your teacher did, that kind of stuff. If you only put things like that on there, it's going to make the potential employer think they don't understand the role they're applying for at all. It's like you give your students a test and the question is 2 plus 2 when they answer periodic table. It's like, okay, that had nothing to do with what I asked. The job posting is is the question. The everything they put in the job posting, they're saying, okay, this is what this person is going to have to do. These are the qualifications. Tell me how you've done things like this. And if you're putting, you know, I manage behavior for 20 kids, they didn't ask you about that. So that's something I want you to think about as we go through this, and especially in part two. Just think about, okay, what did I do outside of typical teacher things? What did I accomplish that shows that I'm qualified to do this role? All right, now formatting. So, myth about the ATS system is that it kicks people out. I hear all the time, I can't get past the ATS. The ATS keeps kicking me out. The ATS is not kicking you out. The system, they might use knockout questions, which is like if you've ever applied for a job and it asks you, are you what's the word? Are you not qualified, certified, authorized to work in the US? That's a knockout question. So certain questions like that, where you're marking yes or no, um, those might knock you out because you don't meet the basic legal requirement to do the job. But your resume isn't going to knock you out. The ATS system is pretty much just a database that holds all the resumes and applications for everyone who applies. And recruiters can filter, just like how you can filter an Excel spreadsheet, they can filter based on certain keywords. That's what you need to make sure your resume has the correct keywords and supporting examples, not just a page full of keywords, but those supporting examples to support those experiences. That's what helps you get past the ATS, which isn't really your thing to get past it, but that's what can help you show up when they decide to filter based on keywords. So when the ATS system parses, which is basically reads your resume, it has to be in a certain format or else it won't read it properly. So there are certain things that you include and don't need to include, certain things you've probably seen that you're like, oh, I want to copy that. You probably shouldn't. Your resume should be very simple, clean. Um, I say boring, but some people don't like boring. They don't like to call their resumes boring, but if it's simple and clean and doesn't have all the razzle dazzle icons and pictures and things like that, you'll at least know that the ATS system can read it properly. It's not going to show up, all tangled up and things. Okay. So you do want to use a simple, clean template. Keep it to 1 to 1.5 pages. As a career changer, you're not going to have 2 and 3 pages worth of relevant experience. If you're going to 2 full pages or going over to 3 and you don't have experience from before being in education, then you're probably adding a lot of irrelevant stuff. And I like to say what's relevant, tell them what they need to hear, and then stop talking. It's much better to have less bullet points that are really strong than to dump everything you've ever done and they have to pick out what's relevant, because they're not going to. They're not going to tame to pick it out. Tame. They're not going to take the time to pick it out. So just don't do it. Submit in the proper format. What I mean is sometimes they might say PDFs, they might say Word documents. Just pay attention to the format that they say to submit it in so that you can submit it in that format. PDFs are typically good, but there are certain ATS systems I've heard that prefer Word. So just make sure that you look for the acceptable format and then name the document. Don't just name it resume. Don't name it untitled document. Put the name, your first and last name, the title of the position, and the company. That's good for them when they download resumes to know exactly whose it is without having to click on it every time. And it's good for you so that if you get an interview, you can remember which resume you sent to this company. Stick to the main sections. Don't get fancy. I've seen where people will put, like, instead of experience, they'll put where I've been. Don't do that. The ATS system looks for certain words. It might be relevant experience, professional experience, work experience. They're looking for experience. Okay. So contact section, you don't have to label it contact section. Professional summary, skills, work experience or relevant experience, education. Just don't get too creative with it. As far as the things that you don't want to have on there, don't put your contact info in the header. And so I'm not saying not to put it at the top. You put it at the top. But as far as a header goes, that's when you double click the top and it shows like the dotted line. Don't put it up there because sometimes they don't, the ATS system can't read it. And so they have no clue whose resume this is. So don't do that. Don't use tables, columns, pictures, icons. It can misread it sometimes. I know with columns, sometimes it can just read straight across. So whereas it should read, up to down, instead it reads left to right. And so it might not even make sense anymore. Abbreviations or acronyms, don't use those unless you, so for example, if you were to talk about uh, RTI, instead of putting, if you put RTI, then in parentheses, you would need to put response to intervention so that they know what you're referring to. Use black ink. You don't have to always. That's a personal thing. I'm pretty safe when it comes to resumes. I'm not going to do anything that could possibly get messed up and cause them to not be able to read it. And so black ink, that's it. Um, let's see. That Don't use Canva templates. I said use a simple, clean template, but I should have explicitly said do not use Canva templates. Just don't do it. If you use a Canva template, it's basically like saying, I don't really want this job. I don't really want them to be able to read this resume. And that would just be a waste of time. You're a teacher, you have no time to waste. So don't use a Canva template. What I would say, if you want to have a pretty one, like let's say you're going for a marketing or instructional design or some kind of role like that, have a simple, clean black and white version. And then you can design a version in Canva where you put the same information. And if you ever email your resume directly to someone, or if you send it like in a LinkedIn message directly to someone, then you can attach it as a PDF and that'll be fine. Otherwise, just don't do it. Just don't do it. And the other issue with Canva templates is that they usually don't have enough space for all the actual content that you need to put on there. And so people end up sacrificing content for the look, but they need to know what you've done. So you got to prioritize that content. All right, now for your contact info, you don't want to put it in the header, which we already said. You can have your name and desired job title. So like right here, I have De'Ara Bennett, marketing manager. If I'm applying for a marketing manager position, like that's the actual title of the role, that would be at the top of my resume. And the reason is because it makes it clear what role I'm applying for, but also the ATS system picks up on that job title in my resume without me claiming to have actually done the role. Because I'm not one of those people that's going to say, to lie about what you've done. So that's the best place to put that title, is with your name. Phone number, email address, LinkedIn URL, and a portfolio link if it's relevant. If you're going for like instructional design or curriculum design, or like content marketing, that's where you would need to have a portfolio. And just a side note, if you are going for roles like that and you don't have a portfolio, hold off on applying until you get a portfolio. Even if they don't say that you need one, the people who are applying have one and they are going to stand out more than you. So that's something that's the harsh truth. Sometimes you might meet qualifications, but if you don't do that extra piece, the other people are doing that extra piece and they will stand out and get that call back over you. So put time into having a portfolio if that's the kind of job that you're going for. Only put your city and state. Do not put your street address. That is not best practice anymore, to put your street address. You don't need to put, I've seen people put like their religion, their, they put personal information. You don't need to put photos of yourself. You don't need any of that kind of stuff. This is literally all you need for your contact information section.
Today's episode is sponsored by the Teacher Career Transition Academy. Our academy provides expert career coaching, professional resume and cover letter templates, small group coaching sessions, and a supportive peer network. The best way to jumpstart your career change journey is to enroll in my free Beyond the Classroom Masterclass. Visit teachercareertransitionacademy.com/masterclass to enroll now. I'll also drop the link to register for free in the show notes of this episode. This free masterclass is sure to kickstart your journey or give you the boost you need to move the needle if you're already in the career change process. Enroll for free at teachercareertransitionacademy.com/masterclass.
All right, now for the skills section, this is where you include hard skills. So technology that you're familiar with that's relevant to the job. That's the key. It needs to be relevant to the job. So if you're not applying for a role at Nearpod or one of their competitors, don't put Nearpod. Now, if you're applying for, let's say you're familiar with Google Classroom and you're applying for a role with Canvas or Schoology or whatever company creates them, then it makes sense to put like learning management system or even Google Classroom, because it lets them know that you are familiar with a similar product. That's what makes it relevant. Otherwise, it's not. You don't have to tell them every piece of technology you're familiar with, only the ones that's relevant. So customer success, Salesforce might be relevant, or another type of CRM. Instructional design, Articulate Rise 360 would be considered relevant technology. So think about the actual technology, project management, Asana or Trello. things like that. Data analysis is an actual skill. Technology implementation, that's something that is also a skill that everyone cannot do. The thing is, with these skills that you add to this section, for the most part, you want to be able to support it in your bullet points. If you've been a teacher and like for Salesforce, you haven't had a reason to use it, of course you won't be able to support that one in your bullet points. But for things like data analysis and technology implementation, those are things that you would need bullet points to support. What you don't need to add to your skills section is soft skills. So things like communication, leadership, um, what was another one that I see? Organization, things like that you don't need to add. That's fluff. And you don't have space for fluff. We want to show them, I've done things. You want to hit them with the power. Okay. That's how we'll say it. Hit them with power. Strong verbal and written communication skills. That's not showing the power. Instead, show it in your bullet points. You don't have to say teamwork in your skills section. Instead, you can have a bullet point talking about how you collaborated with a cross-functional team to achieve something. That shows teamwork without you just putting teamwork to take up space on your resume. So, reading job postings. Let's get into it. When you read a job posting, I'm going to assume you see the title. Oh, this is interesting. Scroll down to the bottom to see if they put the salary. If they do and you like it, you'll read more. If not, you might read more, or you might go to like Glassdoor to figure it out. But anyway, after that, you go to the qualifications to see if you're qualified. If you are, you apply. You're making a mistake. You need to look at the responsibilities and qualifications. The qualifications let you know that, you are qualified for this job. But the responsibilities, that's the gold. If you can show in your resume that you have done things similar to the responsibilities of the role, that makes it much easier for them to picture you in that role. I pay more attention to the responsibilities. Qualifications just like, oh, okay, meet the check, 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 meet them, great, let's move forward. And then go to those responsibilities, and that's where your resume content is going to come from. You have to make sure you understand the actual job, which can often require doing additional research afterwards. Um, I can't tell you how many how many teachers I've had coaching sessions with who show me the jobs that they're interested in because they only looked at the salary and qualifications. And then when I start explaining to them the role, they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. They might say, I just want a remote job where I don't have to talk to anybody and I can just relax and, have work-life balance and flexibility to do the things I need to do and stay home with my kid. Like they'll say things like that. And then the job they send is like customer success, where you're literally talking to customers throughout the day, which is not a job where you don't talk to anybody. And so, I'll explain to them these jobs and they're like, oh no, this is not what I want to do. But save yourself time and energy by making sure you understand the actual job. Also, make sure you meet those minimum qualifications. Now, you'll hear people say, as long as you meet 70% or 80%, apply anyway. That sounds really motivational. And that might be the case when it's a job that's like not let's see, during a job market where it's not as competitive, that might be the case. However, when there are 600 other teachers applying for a job, or you're applying for a job with 2,000 applicants, they don't have to choose someone who meets 70% because they can choose someone who meets 110%. So meet those minimum qualifications as possible. There are actual um, companies, like if they have certain contracts with the government, they're legally not able to hire anyone who doesn't meet the minimum qualifications. They will have to repost it if they don't have someone to meet those qualifications. So that's something to keep in mind when you're trying to preserve your time and your energy and resources. Make sure you meet the minimum one. Now, if it says, my caveat is if it says like 2 years experience doing XYZ, or a related role. If they put or related role, or they say um, or similar fields, or some combination of education and experience, if they put those things there, that shows you they have some flexibility and there's some wiggle room. And those are the ones where I would say, okay, it's worth a shot. Also, take note of the action verbs and words that are repeated so that you can use those in your resume as well. Another thing that's good to know is for some recruiters, they get paid for choosing the candidate that the hiring manager ends up choosing. And so put yourself in their shoes. If your paycheck depends on choosing the right candidate for the job, you're going to choose the person who you think the hiring manager is going to hire. You're going to choose the person who is the most qualified. So definitely, put yourself in their shoes and think, okay, would this resume show that I'm qualified? If my paycheck depended on this, would I be the person that I put in front of the hiring manager? If not, go back to the drawing table and revise the resume some more. All right, so let's talk about writing a professional summary. It only needs to be 2 to 3, I put sentences, but I would say lines, so visually it's not too long. 2 to 3 lines summarizing what they'll read about in your resume. Use the language from the job posting. So in this case, the job posting says bachelor's degree in, let's say, marketing or a related field. Well, hold on. Well, yeah, we'll just stick with marketing or communication, bachelor's degree in communication or a related field. 4 years of experience managing customer relationships. So those are qualifications. And then these two are responsibilities. In this role, you will analyze customer engagement data to identify implementation strengths and areas of need. In this role, you will collaborate with internal teams to drive teacher adoption and success. So qualifications and responsibilities. How can we turn that into a professional summary? Here's what I would come up with. Data-driven education professional with 5 years of experience managing relationships with stakeholders. Let's go back. Talking about managing customer relationships. If you didn't work with customers, you can't say customers because that would be dishonest. And so stakeholders encompasses students, parents, teachers, staff, every community members. It encompasses everyone that you might have had to manage relationships with. So that's why I like to use stakeholders. Analyzing data to identify strengths and needs. We see that right here. Analyze customer engagement data to identify implementation strengths and areas of need. So again, if you didn't analyze customer engagement data, you can't say that you did, but you can say something close to it. And in your bullet points, you can expand on it. And collaborating with internal teams to drive the adoption of new technology. Let's see if that's here. Yep. Collaborate with internal teams to drive, this is supposed to say technology, or tech, to drive technology adoption and success. Okay. Track record of developing strategic plans to achieve organizational outcomes. And then I like to add a notable accomplishment if it's relevant, but you don't have to. So let's say that this is for a customer success position. So notable accomplishment might be notable accomplishment increasing uh, technology usage data by 10% within 2 weeks. That would be a notable accomplishment. And so since I have a little time, I'm going to tell you some examples of what I mean by this. So talking about managing relationships with stakeholders, I already told you about that. Analyzing data to identify strengths and needs. This is like when you're analyzing assessment data, or maybe you're analyzing usage data for some kind of technology product that you use with the students. Collaborating with internal teams to drive the adoption of new technology. If you talk during COVID, think back to COVID times when you might have been looking up technology. And again, this is relevant to customer success. It just depends on what kind of job you're going for. In part two, I have examples from a few different jobs. So make sure that you go over there because that's where we're going to start talking about all of the bullet points and just how to bring the rest of your resume together. All right, so for your homework, because you have a lot to do. We covered a lot in this first section. And so there are certain things that you need to do in order to be prepared to really put in the work for part two. So for your homework, find 3 job postings for a role you're interested in. This is one role for 3 companies. I didn't mention this earlier, but you need to focus on one role because you have to tailor your resume for each job you apply for. If you're applying for random roles from all over the place, you're going to spend so much time applying for these jobs, and that's going to take away time that you could be spending upskilling, meaning learning new skills that will make you more qualified for the job. So I highly, highly, highly recommend choosing a role to focus in on and finding out how to upskill for that role so that you can then save yourself a ton of time and not drain yourself as much because job searching can be really draining. Okay, so one role, 3 companies. So that might be customer success manager at Google, Apple, and Facebook, okay, or Meta. All right, highlight the similarities between those job postings. So if they all say that they want you to be able to use a certain type of technology, highlight that. If they all say managing customer relationships, highlight that. If they all say, um, what's something else? Project management skills, highlight that. Highlight the things that are in common in the qualifications and the responsibilities so that you have a good starting point for what they're looking for. Remember, when we look at the job posting, we're thinking of it as the test questions. So look for similar test questions so that you can tailor your answers to the questions you'll most likely be asked on the test. Okay. It's just like if I have to take a 200 question test, there are 3 different study guides. If there's a question that's on all these study guides, you're going to make sure you know the answer to that one. That's kind of how, or not kind of, that's how you should look at this as well. I want you to write your professional summary and base it off of those similarities you've seen in those job postings. After you've done that, join me in part 2, where you'll learn how to write strong bullet points with metrics. Thank you so much for tuning in. My website is down below, careerconfidencebyd.com, if you need one-on-one coaching or more assistance. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Deira, Deira Bennett. I'll see you in part 2.